What is India?
India is the country, from all of the statistics using 10-year growth rates and also just what's apparent, India will have probably the greatest growth rate, the fastest growth rate economically, have the greatest transformation of any country. And I would say, like, if I was going to paint the world, there is this great power conflict and lots of things going on that are great and terrible in both China and the United States. And then there's the countries that are not in that, the neutral countries. So here we are in the UAE, and you think about what's going on here and in Saudi and so on. Or you go to Singapore and you look at what's happening in the ASEAN countries, Indonesia, Vietnam, and so on, and you look at India. It's an advantage through all history and world wars. Those that have not been involved in the wars and stand aside from the wars actually prosper from whatever conflicts exist. So we're going to have different types of wars between those two states, but India is going to be. India will do great, I think, and then the question is, what does that mean for the rest of us?
Well, India has a lot of very socialistic policies having to do with labor and land, and the fact that it has not risen as a manufacturing power is an indictment of its government policies. That is, as China's incomes went up, the place that the world should have moved to next as the manufacturing hub of the world absolutely should be India. And that's only happening to a very, very tiny extent. And it has to do with, regulatory complexities, infrastructure quality. Now, I'm optimistic about India. We put more into India than any country in the world. India benefits from a funny form of competition, which is competition between the states. And so, when one state really gets its act together, the other states tend to feel jealous, and they, are kind of looking at what policies led to that.
I want to understand from you, how is the Indian government looking at the multipolar world today, India's role in it, and specifically in terms of a roadmap to be able to get to whether it's 5 trillion or 10 trillion, where do you believe we stand on the reform roadmap? How much more work needs to be done?
Thank you, Shireen. India has approached this entire transition which is happening in the world on multiple dimensions. One, the first dimension is to make sure that India's economy is resilient. There is a good, consistent 6 to 8% growth rate for a complete decade. It's not just 1 year or 2 year kind of thing. The thought process and the policy framework which follows is for a complete decade, 6 to 8% growth with very moderate inflation. The second dimension is when the world is looking for resilient supply chains, and as you said in your opening statement, India has a very young population. So how do we attract large number of supply chain participants to India? How do we make it resilient? He put entire capital of the country into investment in infrastructure. Now, investment in railways, last year the capex was 23 billion US. This year the capex is, this fiscal which ends on 31st March, the capex is going to be of the order of 26 billion US. Same is the story in railway, in highway, in power transmission. That increases the productivity of the country and gives us the long-term growth potential of the country improves. It's resulting into huge employment generation. Today the country is adding on an average 1.5 million people into formal jobs every month. So that kind of those decisions have shaped the country's destiny over the last few years, and that has put us on a very consistent growth path of 6 to 8%. India is used to an inflation rate of 5 to 7% because large part of our energy is imported. So having inflation today at 5.8, 5.9%, that's the latest print. That's very moderate. So high growth, moderate inflation. This we were able to achieve because Prime Minister took very pragmatic and a very focused approach. One very important part of this entire decision making was Prime Minister ensured that the fiscal policy and monetary policy, they work in tandem. There are so many examples in the world, I wouldn't take any names, where the fiscal policy was going in one direction and the monetary policy was going in another. Our central bank didn't have to drop the interest rates like a brick, didn't have to increase the interest rate like a balloon. It was a very moderate, very balanced view of things. So our central bank today is in a very good position with a good balance sheet of the central government. Our central government's liabilities are just about 52% of the GDP, and GDP growing nominal at 11-12% is a very good situation to be in. So I think, yes, fiscal consolidation is a very important priority. But what is important is we have to look at growth as the primary driver, moderate inflation as the primary decision point, and combine the fiscal and monetary policy to continue that momentum for next 10 years.
Investments in capital. I can talk for our group to start with. I think we have a very, very huge capex outlay between steel, auto, electric vehicles, renewable energy, batteries, electronics, and a host of other businesses. Our capital commitment for the next 5 years is $90 billion. So I don't know where this fear that private sector will not come in is coming from. But at the end of the day, private sector takes time because we can't just announce an outlay. Government can decide that we are going to make an outlay of $20 billion towards this, and then they can work out the plan. We can't do that. We have to make a business case. We got to go to the board. We got to get a spreadsheet. We got to see what is the IRR, what is the ROE, what is the ROC. Okay, all of this takes time. But I think the opportunity is huge. Opportunity is huge, and I think this 6 to 8% growth, at the low end at 6%, we will achieve $20 trillion by 2047. At the high end at 8%, you'll achieve $30 trillion. So the number will be somewhere in between. And so I think the opportunity is real, and private sector will come in definitely. Business and government. So that's why the digital transition, we are extremely well placed. Energy transition, we are well placed because we are probably the only nation of scale where 2/3 of our growth for the next 25 years is going to come. So all our energy per capita is the lowest in the world. So it will increase. The amount of energy we are going to consume is so much, and all of this is new energy. So we are not replacing the bad energy. We are creating new energy for development. And to do this transition when there is growth, all of us who are in business know growth fixes every problem. You can have any problem, it will all be fixed by growth. I always say the three priorities should be growth, growth, growth. And I think we have that opportunity to make the transition beautifully than any other nation. The third one, the question that Shirin asked, is India Plus. I think it is not about replacing somebody. The world needs resilience. Resilience has to take precedence over efficiency. Over the last 50 years, we have driven efficiency beyond belief. So now we have to go back to being effective first, then put efficiency second. So the India Plus is for India to take the lead, to build the supply chain is ecosystem. It's not one person's game. Nobody can do it alone. We need partners. We need to work with other countries. We need to work with companies, US companies, Western companies, other companies who are willing to work with you on a transparent basis. So India Plus, when I say that, I mean India takes the lead and builds this ecosystem so that we become an alternate, resilient supply chain for the world. It is not about replacing somebody.
Over a period of last 1.5 years, the assembly is now going deeper and wider. Component supply chain is shifting to India. Indian homegrown companies are coming up with components as well as many critical parts of the supply chain. And that is what is very, very encouraging. That is what is really good. We believe that, for example, this iPhone 14 is made in India, right? And now quite a few parts of it, quite a few components of it are now getting made in India. So that makes a huge difference. It is adding jobs. It is creating new economic opportunities.